Welcome to episode 26, No Guitars Without Music. Nick Ramon in Wellington, myself in Auckland. And we've not spoken to each other for a while, I think maybe a couple of weeks, so we've got plenty to catch up on today. So, Nick, fill us in. What have you been up to?
It's been pretty busy, actually. The weekend just been, I was in Christchurch playing with the Christchurch Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really fun. We had 4 great singers and an old mate on sound who exactly who I'm talking about, but I won't mention. We get there and he's like, you guys, I thought you weren't bringing amps. I thought you were just going to use the monitors. And I was like, nope. And he was like, well, that's kind of what the sound guy wanted. I'm like, so? Because I borrowed one of those Fender FR10s to run my fractal through,
Right.
And I was like, I'm not using, and I'm really glad I didn't because, as the gig got louder and louder and bigger, he kept turning the monitors down and down,
Yeah.
And but then you couldn't hear the vocal, and we were all struggling to hear the vocal, and the keyboard player was asking for hi-hats in his monitor, which never happened. But it was an awesome gig. Christchurch Symphony's a good orchestra, actually. I haven't worked with them before. I've been booked 2 or 3 times, and hasn't happened for various reasons. But they're a really good orchestra, and the rhythm section was killing. So
Awesome.
That was great fun. And then before that, Wellington Jazz Festival. So I did the double drummer gig with Darren and Rick and Leo. And then I did a quartet gig where I played my album Refractions from beginning to end, which was awesome. And then I hosted the Saturday night late night jam session, so that was fun.
Cool. Did you get anyone cool coming to jam?
Yeah. Well, there were some interesting things. There was some really good jammers. There was another jam session happening at another club around the corner that started at 12, so we started at 11. So I'd say the first hour we had was pretty busy, and then the second hour was kind of still people, but not as much.
Right.
We had one drummer who's kind of a famous drummer, played with a lot of people, but he'd had way too much to drink. Like, way too much to drink. And it was kind of interesting, but I mean, all the other jammers were all regulars, except there was a young drummer from Christchurch who was great. Sounded really killing. He came and sat in, so that was, it was all good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
And the double drummer gig was so much fun, man. Those Darren and Rick together.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realise, but that's like the 2 drummers from Warren Maxwell's kind of supergroup. So Darren being the drummer for Trinity Roots originally, and Rick was the drummer for Little Bushman, which was the kind of band that happened afterwards. And there they were on the gig together. So
amazing.
Yeah, it was so much fun. What have you been doing?
What have I been? I've actually been cleaning my house and doing a bit of spring cleaning.
I thought you were going to say I've been cleaning my hair and my sock drawer and.
Well, I did manage to sell that DG20 pickguard on Trade Me Free Selling. That's a funny thing that happened.
Yeah, so why did you sell it?
I sold it because I missed the tone knob on the bridge pickup more than anything. And that was like, every time I picked it up, I was like, always like, why is it not there? I mean, I could have gone for the Vince Gill one, which does have a traditional tone thing. Then you got to wire it to, there was more headache to do it. I just thought it'll be easier to just pop a mid boost on a pedal, and just chuck that original pickguard back. And also the in-betweens were like way nicer on the traditional single coils. Those EMGs for some reason, it lost a whole bunch of frequencies, and then you had to try and put it back with that EXG knob. And then when you had that cranked, you couldn't go to any of the other pickups without having to turn that down. So as a recording guitar, it had its uses, but I would think there's very little that I couldn't normally accomplish with some pedals and, normal single coils.
Yeah.
And I'd rather put the money towards some other experiment that,
Maybe even like the David Gilmour set. Does it have a traditional tone control?
No, that's the one I had. I had the DG20 set.
Oh, you had the DG20.
The Vince Gill one apparently has one mid boost and one traditional one, but then it only came in that grey, ugly color, or something like that. I didn't like it.
So what other the EMG sets have tone controls? Do any of them, or
do they? Sure.
Other than the Vince Gill?
I guess you could, wire it up with each of those modules and then do it how you wanted. But considering I was way too deep into having normal passive pickups, just having one guitar that always was a bit of an outlier kind of thing.
I don't think of Vince Gill as using EMGs, do you? I mean, it's like I see him as quite a traditional.
The thing is, even Gilmour, once he went back to playing the Black Strat, there was very little usage of the EMGs, but on the recent tour he's pulled out that Candy Apple Strat, so that was kind of interesting to see him with the Pulse guitar for a few songs. You see the bit where his strap broke and he
I know.
switches guitars just before he comes in with comfort. Man, talk about pressure.
And that strap was the Jimi Hendrix strap, I think, that his wife bought him for the,
Yep.
yeah, the Jimi Hendrix strap. Yeah.
But apparently they got it fixed by some leather maker in time for the next show, so that at least got it back in action.
I'm sure.
So I pulled out this guitar today because I haven't played it in a while.
That was going to be my next question. What's that guitar you got? Is it new or
no,
is it?
It's something I've had for a while. In fact, before I got the Les Paul, I just needed one dual humbucker guitar, and I got this. I think there was a guy selling it cheaply from Hong Kong, and then it got shipped here. But it had gold hardware, and that was a little bit hard on the eye. At least for me, I'm not really a blingy guy. So I think my dad had this Les Paul, and we just swapped the hardware, and the gold looked cool on that one. So the only thing left over is this, switch ring, and I think under the posts you've got the gold studs where that thing mounts in. But I found this old set of PRS Dragon pickups, which for some reason I always liked them in whatever guitar I've had them just like lying in a drawer. And I said, cool, it'd be nice to try them and pop them in. And man, they sounded so nice.
They're really good pickups. Yeah. The PRS pickups are great.
Because
I've always
used the neck around halfway. Just listen to that. Somewhere around like 6 or 7. It's like super clear and the bridge.
And what wiring have you got in the guitar?
The usual 50s, 60s. And I had some.
I was going to say, because when you turned down there, it was a really nice kind of.
So now there's the bridge pickup around 8 or something, and with some drive. So it's got plenty of that snarl if I needed to. And most of the time I had it tuned to E flat because I was playing along with like Thin Lizzy or Guns N' Roses or whatever, that sort of thing. And then I just was working on a bunch of drop D stuff. So I, got this. It's easy enough to tune it back without having to, reset it or whatever. So,
well, that Paul Reed Smith, apparently when he was designing the shape of these guitars, apparently what he did was he took a Strat and he took an SG and kind of put them together.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see it, right? Yeah. If you look at the shape, you can kind of see an SG in there and definitely see the Strat influences too, It's like, you can see where he got it from. I find SGs really comfortable, like way more comfortable than a Les Paul, because of that angle of the arm thing doesn't dig into you, and also the lighter, smaller body and all that sort of stuff. The only thing you have to watch with them is the neck joint can be a little on some. I've played some SGs where you play it and the whole neck goes.
That's the thing with this. You can get a bit of that vibrato going on because the neck is like so not stable, shall we say? But this one, I think the neck's also like pretty narrow. It's a 61 reissue, so not really a huge ass chunky neck. But it is quite wide, which I kind of like, especially like for chording and stuff. Yeah, you kind of, especially big hands, you find that a very useful thing to have. So even like if I'm like stretching and stuff like that, it's really comfortable for that sort of thing.
A student of mine bought a 335, and he bought off the internet was a 70s 335, and it was the one with the really thin nut. And I played it, and I'm like, man, I can't play this. It's unplayable to me. 42, 43 millimeter nut is kind of the minimum for me.
Yeah, there's a friend with a vintage Rickenbacker, and he knows what a big, huge Beatles nut I am. So he was like very excitedly, check it out and everything. So I put my hand on it. I was like, I can't play this guitar. It's like, so like narrow over here. I couldn't even play an A chord. Can you imagine? I was struggling with that. So it's a nice shaped neck, and I always wanted the black one because of Angus, I guess.
Yeah, looks great. Sounds good too. That sounds really like you could even tell just when you were playing those chords that it's got a ring about it. That's just,
it does have one dead stop though, which is I think if you bend that D up to an E, it never really sustains. It does it in every other place. Like you bend this one, it's fine. You bend this one up, it's fine. Just that guy over there. which bugs me because every time I try to play Parisian Walkways, it's that one note that does it.
Is that a fret issue, do you think, or what is it?
I've heard of SG just having, a dead spot here and there, and you just have to deal with it. That's kind of...
I hope it's not a knot in the neck or something, because I have heard of someone I know ordered a Les Paul like 20 years ago off the internet and got it here, and there was a dead spot in the neck because of a knot.
Yeah.
And he, could tell, and that just nothing would ring in those notes for some reason.
It's not so much the lack of sustain. I think what happens is the note quickly shifts to the upper harmonic. It's kind of weird. Like I'll show you. Like check this out. Like you start hearing the higher harmonic, like just jump.
I like that though.
Yeah, it's nice in a way. It kind of gives it some attitude. But if you're trying to hold the fundamental, it's gone. That's the one thing I noticed about it. But other than that, I mean, it's a great rhythm guitar for like, power chords and stuff. So every time I'm like doing big fat layers, this will probably be one side of it, if not both, And it does have a nice mid-range, not like that full Les Paul mid-range, if you know what I mean, like with that low mid and everything coming like, ooh, that kind of a thing. It's got more of that snarl to it, which is very nice. And compared to the Les Paul, obviously it's lighter, so like you can actually do a gig and not like... Though that one's not that heavy, it's kind of, like 7 and something, or no, 8 and something, yeah. This one's...
Yeah, my Les Paul's about 8.5, I think, maybe closer to like, 9, and it's just too heavy.
It's like 5.5 or 6 kilos, 6 pounds or something, so super.
This is 6.5, which I think is about my ideal. If some guitars are too light, I find that they don't have enough weight in the body and they become neck heavy. So 6.5 seems to balance about right. Everything feels about right.
That's another thing.
Anything more than that.
That's another thing about modern SGs as well, because they switched from those Cluson tuners to those Grovers, which are a bit heavier. So you have the whole neck dive. Especially if you've got it on that strap, you just hold it and it just wants to do that all night, and then your kind of hand gets. Heavy lifting, no, like not heavy, but it feels tired holding the whole thing up.
Yep.
So then you need to get one of those straps which, holds on to the shoulder without...
Like a textured strap like that.
That grips your shoulder nicely, and then it doesn't do that as much. But yeah, this one I never really had a problem with, the neck dive issue. So,
perfect.
While we're in drop D, here is something that I've been trying to figure out. So maybe you can, give us some insight onto these. As far as I know, like they're pretty non-standard thing, but it kind of moves chromatically. So the intro to Black Hole Sun, it starts with this here. I'll switch to a cleaner sound, right? Which is like, since you're in drop D, this will be I think a B? G, sorry. Yeah. So G, sus4, and then you go to this B flat with that's B third, it's the 6th, and sus2 as well in there. And then it goes down to this straight up F5 power chord. I like how he does this. Like the open string.
Yeah.
Then you've got an E5, and then finally this E flat sus4, I guess, and like a D7 kind of thing, which brings you back to the G. So though you start off, with that sus4, it's kind of G based roughly, and it like switches major to minor. Now when the verse starts, you have all those Leslie sounding bits.
Leslie parts,
Yeah, so that first one is a G6 to me. That's what it sounds like. Then it goes, the bass goes up to a B flat, and that becomes like a G minor arpeggio. So that's basically, like B flat 6. Yeah. And then you've got, right? And then
F something,
yeah, F like a straight up power chord, F5. Even the harmony is your root 5 root, and then it goes to E minor, and then E flat major, and then over the D you've got the suspension,
sus4 again.
Yeah, and then here's where it gets cool. It comes back to G6. And then you've got this F with a dominant 7 kind of kind of voicing, and then finally comes to rest on the B flat. So then that leads you back into so this particular one, where it goes. That's a bit of a finger twister if you do get the fingering, So normally what I was doing was this, and then this, you fret it with just these two fingers. That keeps this guy ready to go in for that E flat major triad. And then when you come to the chorus, that's when the distortion kicks in. It's like basically just following this bit from the intro. I'll go back to... I've got that D7 going back into... But this is a nice one. And then back into... And then you've got this, bring you back into the G at some point in the middle. It's got this really cool riff. Yeah. So I was like, wondering what to do because there's two guitar parts, the main riff and all that warp pedal, improv that Kim Thile's doing. But listening to it, it goes, You can do the old stairway on it.
Yeah. I was going to say, doesn't it, the wah-wah parts, aren't they just like a noise solo rather than anything?
Yeah,
really?
it's more like a texture because even in the mix, it's not like jumping out at you. It's kind of, tucked in. And the drums are doing some really cool stuff, in that. Like, it's almost like it resets when it comes in. So if you try to count it like you normally would, try to make sense of the little bits, it gets like super confusing. But I just thought to like phrase it like how you phrase sentences. You go,
exactly. I find a lot of Soundgarden tunes like that. You just, because often the riffs don't necessarily make sense in terms of you might go, what's a bar of 5 and a bar of 4 and a bar of this or whatever. But it just makes more sense to just kind of hear it. And then you might go 3, 4, 5, 6. And you might have some kind of count like that. Yeah. And that's because I remember playing what the song Wave was kind of like that, And if you know that song. I remember playing that back in the day, and it has some, real quirky kind of stuff about it. It's really interesting. I love Soundgarden. I think they're great. Yeah. I think he's such an underrated guitar player too. Like
Chris Cornell?
Chris Cornell too, but Kim Thale?
Yeah, totally.
He just, the way he plays, it's like, to me, I hear, the most important thing to me with any guitarist is how unique and original they sound. Yeah. And I just hear, when I hear Kim Thale play, I'm like, nobody sounds like that. Nobody would think to do those kind of chord things in the way he does, and it's kind of totally unusual and unique, and I love it. It's great.
It's also
my daughter's actually a fan of Soundgarden now too, so she's got the bug.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell he was kind of detached from the traditional, blues based or whatever soloing, but there is some connection to like early Sabbath and stuff. You can hear a bit of the Tommy Iommi kind of influence in there. But the thing is, like, his playing totally created a vibe in those songs, which is very hard to
100%
to come by like that. If went for someone that was just playing a traditional guitar solo, it may not have sounded as unique as it did at the time. I remember that album was pretty groundbreaking when it came out. Seeing like MTV playing Black Hole Sun, like that's something I haven't seen in a very long time. I was kind of very hooked onto the Leslie guitar part from like just the start. Though I think that's probably Cornell playing that, because there was this Pete Thorne. I'm not sure. There was this Pete Thorne thing where someone was selling, I think on Reverb, a Leslie, and they said that was the Leslie that was used on Black Hole Sun. And someone sent it to Pete Thorne. He said, you may want to, when Chris was still alive, he said, you may want to forward this to him and see, what he has to say. I think Chris saw it and it's like, shit, I think it is the one. And then he went and bought it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I could be getting
That's
this wrong,
cool,
but
though.
as far as I remember, that's how it went, and it was pretty cool that he did end up with that, because that's like pretty much an iconic piece of gear, man. Like that's what defined the
100%.
Leslie speaker
Yeah.
to all those 90s kids.
Like if I think of Leslie speaker in a rock setting,
Yeah,
that's the song, right? I actually have a Leslie speaker back there. You probably can't see it, but it's a Mesa Boogie Revolver.
the whole
I don't know if I've told you about that one before.
about Bonamassa trying to buy it.
Yeah. So it's an unusual thing for those that don't know about the revolvers. They actually have a square box that's about this size inside it, and it's got a speaker mounted on it, and the box actually spins inside the whole cabinet, you know.
Right.
And sounds really unique because it's not really like a Leslie. Like a Leslie has the horn and then the bottom, and they're kind of they're doing this and they're out of time with each other. But the revolver really sounds more like chorus.
Oh yeah.
So if you imagine a chorus that you can ramp up and down like a Leslie, because you know chorus pedals can sound like, except the where it's different from chorus is it's actually moving air. And that's the thing, so you get the 360 swirl and throw. It's a very unique sound. It's unusual how Joe Bonamassa uses it, because he's got one now too. He kind of just blends it in with all his other stuff,
The amps,
and I'm like, man, it's like you can't really even tell when you're doing that. And then he uses a Leslie pedal when he wants a more traditional Leslie sound. So
Leslie sound,
yeah.
Just looking back, I think there were two other Leslie solos that I can remember from that era. There was this one on this Bon Jovi song called "Always" that had a very distinct Leslie guitar solo, and there was the Aerosmith one. I think "What It Takes." And when I did
don't know if I know that one.
the demo for the UA Rotary, the Waterfall, I said that'll be a nice solo to do, so I learned that. This sound, especially if you go back on the solo, you can hear the parts where the Leslie slows down for like certain phrases, and then he speeds it up again. So I don't know if they did that while they were tracking, or they could have just reamped it through a Leslie. And like from the earlier stuff, I think "Badge" by Cream was one of them. There was heaps of Beatles
Jimmy
stuff.
Page did some stuff with a Leslie too, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he
I
did.
think Page did some.
Yeah. And there was one bit I remember in Dark Side of the Moon. I think it's called Any Color You Like. The guitars, they do this little bit where there's like a little Leslie guitar break. You can just hear that, it's almost like you can hear the mechanism of that thing going if you listen
They
very
do. They
closely.
have noise. My first album, Wishful Thinking, we actually tracked one of the guitar parts through a Leslie. I recorded a DI and then we sent it back out, and they had a Leslie that they'd modified so it could accept a guitar input, and we recorded that. And you can hear this sort of clickingness of all the things, the mechanical sounds of it. That's where I think a lot of the emulations miss.
Yeah.
They kind of get the swirl, they get the speed up and all the stuff, but it's all that kind of unique little clicky things that they do. And it's never consistent. Like, it's not like you'll go every 6 turns it'll click. It's like
Random.
It's a cabinet. It's a real thing moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 direct Doppler shifts happening, one on the top rotors and one on the horn at the bottom. So, sorry, the drum, not the horn. So this the relation of the two, the phasing between the two, that does add in, especially like how you mic it, where like you're doing stereo mics on the top and one at the bottom, or you just move the mic a little bit further away and get it. There was a song of mine called "Ode to a Sunny Day" that I recorded some like backing vocal textures kind of a thing, and I just wanted to make them sound a little bit otherworldly. And I remembered on Dark Side, I think all the backing vocals, they've put it into some kind of a pitch thing which wobbled the pitch a bit. So you kind of got the pseudo Leslie thing happening. So that kind of led me to like, oh, what about the real Leslie? So I've sent all the, the vocals into the Leslie one by one and recorded them. But by the time there were like maybe like 4 tracks, I think. And by the time you lined up all the 4 tracks, all the noises started like, getting a bit much. So in the end, I skimmed and put the whole vocal bus through a Leslie plugin.
I was going to say, if you put all 4 through at the same time, the Leslie will be exactly in
the
time with
same.
each other too, wouldn't it?
But unfortunately, I didn't figure that out until much later when I was mixing, and that time I didn't have the luxury of doing it again. So yeah, the plugin happened on the mix instead.
Well, that's cool though. At least you got it done. You know what I mean? And so that sounds like an interesting idea.
Yeah. It did sound pretty unique because a lot of people have asked me, "Oh, what is that sound?" and everything. Or it's just like And then I think I reverbed it as well, so like you're hearing more of the reverb than the actual dry signal. So it does.
Did you put the reverb before or after the Leslie?
Probably after, I think.
After?
Yeah.
Because it can be really interesting sometimes to put, like with reverb and tremolo, if you swap them around.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like on the Flint pedal, you can swap them, and it's kind of interesting to kind of try that,
I would actually put the tremolo after the reverb, because just traditionally, like if you look at a Fender
amp. Like a Fender amp.
Yeah, where the tremolo comes is like on the power tubes, and that's after the reverb circuit. So the reverb has to be tremoloed rather than the tremolo being reverbed. You know what I mean? And also, I think there was one episode of the that pedal show where they actually showed you the difference, and you can hear the tremolo effects like way more pronounced when you have it after the reverb, because those entire tails are getting modulated in time.
It's interesting you say that, because I saw Robert Keeley has got a new pedal out called the Zoma, how do you say it? Zoma.
Right.
And it's a stereo reverb and tremolo, kind of like a Flint pedal, but his own kind of take on it and kind of thing. And he had Ariel Poston on there playing, and Ariel was talking about it, and they were doing his usual slide thing. And Ariel was saying he likes it with the tremolo afterwards because, tradition of it. And Robert Keeley was saying that he likes it the other way around. He likes it with the tremolo first and the reverb second. And I thought that's interesting, Yeah.
That's usually like if you're applying the reverb in a studio setting and your amp had tremolo but not reverb, and then that got added later, then that's how it would be. But on a typical, Fender style amp, your reverb comes first. In the tune.
Well, it can be interesting too if you hear the pulsing in the tremolo. The pulsing in the reverb. Like if you play a chord and you do something like you go, and then you hear the reverb go.
Oh yeah.
It's go.
Whoa.
That's kind of
from the reverb. Yeah.
Kind of an interesting effect,
Yeah. I always thought it'd be cool to have a reverb pedal. A tremolo pedal where you shift between like a certain time and then a double time or a different time variation of that. So you go from whoa, something like that, almost like like dubstep or something like that. But you can do it damn easily on the HX Stomp. You just assign one.
Yeah, I was going to say expression pedal.
Just hit the switch and.
Yeah, I just did that with this setting right here. Actually, I've got I downloaded James Valentine's preset from Fractal, because Cooper Carter, who actually does the programming for James Valentine for the Maroon 5.
Yep.
Did this video, and they made the preset available to whoever wanted it.
Right.
And there's an interesting setting here, which is the 8th preset, which has a Univibe on it.
Right.
And it's hooked up to an expression pedal, so you get... Oh, my expression pedal's back there, but... You can hear it's really slow there. But there's some cool sounds that he had, the actual ones that he used on the tour. And they showed this footage, it's on the G66 channel, they showed this footage of James playing, and they mute the band and just have him on stage playing. It's kind of funny because sometimes the camera goes up and he's singing, and yet all you're hearing is the guitar. But he's playing all those songs, and,
Yeah.
Just a dumble, and then or dumble.
Tell me something. Where does the Univibe come in relation with distortion? Is it before or after your drive block?
It is after.
Okay.
So the signal chain is input, wah, which is not on, drive's on, drive's not on, and then the amp is an ODS 100 with a 4x12.
Try
and a volume pan.
Try dragging that Univibe block before the drive. It does sound very different. You may prefer it that way.
I'm going to hit the expression a bit higher too. There you go. So this is just before the reverb.
Yeah, so move it like right
after amp, but
right in front of the chain.
And I'll chuck it right in front of the amp now. Now after.
See, what you need to listen to is the top end. You know that that sounding bit. It always.
I'll turn my mic off because with my mic on, it's hard to hear.
Yeah.
Really noticeable, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
You can really hear that it just lost all its top end.
I always tend to prefer it before distortion, unless I'm going into a driven amp, and then I'll put the drive or the boost into the vibe, as long as that last distortion stage is right at the end. It sounds better.
Yeah, so it's after a driven Dumble type amp, you know. It's interesting in that video too. He talks about how he had his setup, which was 4 heads going into a cabinet and the whole lot, and because he took some convincing to kind of switch over to the fractal world, and he got his tech to put it in the studio, and they mic'd it up and sent it through, and he sat in the studio in the control room with the monitors there. And they had a real Friedman, and then they had the fractal Friedman, and his tech was like trying to convince him, like, you know, come on, like, can you tell which is which? And he was like, that one there is the amp. I'm sure it's the amp.
Right.
And his tech goes, nope, that's the fractal. And that's when he went, okay, it's time to do this.
Yeah.
So apparently what he was going to do was to have the fractal plus have original versions of pedals in front of it, like an OCD. Apparently he's into OCD pedals, which I like. And then they big that as well, and he was like, I can't tell the difference. Yeah. So he went full fractal on it now. So
yeah, I don't know. I still kind of mixing, you know, pedals with the
me too,
the actual amps. Or if you're using a real amp, then, you know, some of those pedal models, you know, as long as there's some real shit in there.
Well, what I like about using pedals is it gives you manual control again.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
and really easy manual control. Like I mean, you can do it in the fractal, but it's like there's just something nice. So the gig in the weekend, I actually took an OCD, my version 1.6 down with me, and ran that into the FM3. And actually, I think I used it once all night, but I just had it there,
right,
just in case I wanted to tweak a little bit, and I didn't really need to, but yeah, I'm the same. And the other thing too is that's why I often use the FM3 because. So it's so small you can just it's like an HX Stomp. You can just put a pedal in front of it and integrate it into a thing. Even if you run into an amp, you could run a few pedals in FM3 and then into an amp. Work.
Yeah.
I did use an amp the other day though for the gig at the Jazz Festival.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. Yeah, they had a Blues Junior there, and I kind of knew that would be the in-house amp, and I thought this is just not going to work for. A jazz gig where I have to be clean, you know.
Yeah.
And I knew I was hosting the jam session later that night, so I thought I'll take my little Victoria Deluxe and run it side by side. And I thought too, if there's jammers coming, they won't know how to use my fractal. I thought I'll just take a pedal board and it was interesting. It sounded good, like it really sounded good. But I thought the amp, after having not played an amp for a while and live, would feel different, but it didn't. I didn't, like, response and everything felt pretty much the same.
At this point in your, you know, guitar playing journey, you can just adjust like that without having
I think that's it, yeah.
Without having to
I think more for me too, it's kind of, I'm so used to just playing whatever the hell I get that I just have to get used to it. I'm so used to like the backline being different every gig, and you get there and you go, oh, what amp is it going to be today? Like it might be a Blues Junior or that Deluxe that's at the Blues Club. The Deluxe was upstairs, so we were stuck with the Blues Junior. Or a Roland Jazz Chorus, or a Hot Rod DeVille that tremolo pulses, or whatever.
You probably have better luck getting the amp that you want in India, because I guess nowadays at least they take those riders a bit more seriously. There was like this very urgent message I got. Oh, do you know anyone who has JCM 2000 DSL, whatever? I'm like, yeah, this is the guy who has it. You can get it from there. And I'm like, who's it for? It's like, oh, Nuno's coming down. That's what he asked for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you were like, give me free tickets and I want to come to the show.
My band's opening. So.
Oh, well, you were in New Zealand at the time, were you?
No, they're going to be playing later in November. That's what I'm going down to India for.
Oh, you're going to go and see... Oh, that's right. You did tell me that.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So we got.
Yeah, but it's funny, isn't it? Like that's what Nuno actually asked for. Go and take a photo of his settings on the amp.
Yeah. To be honest, though,
do you ever do that?
Any of those settings is actually of use to anyone but him.
No.
You know, he's got.
But isn't it funny how you see nerdy guitar players doing that? Go and take photos of the amp settings or something like. Like they're going to sound like that if they just set it. You know.
And the most I'd actually look at is where his volume is set, just to see like how loud the amps are on stage. And I think he's got a Boss GD8 or something for effects, so probably that's what's.
And the rat pedal, apparently he won't play through an amp without a rat pedal. And he has the gain down low, but he just runs through it for its preamp kind of circuit. I thought that was interesting.
The mid-range coloration, I think that he's after, because it does shape the mid-range in a certain way, so it hits the amp a bit. It's like almost like how we use Tube Screamer, same thing.
Yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because a Marshall does have, when you think about it, there's a certain frequency range, right? Like you would say a black panel Fender, for example, has a scooped mid-range, you know what I mean? Whereas I think Marshalls have more thicker mid-range, so he's probably just trying to shift that somewhere else, you know? Yeah, interesting.
Also,
such a killer player.
On a Marshall, the tone stack actually comes much later than on a Fender. On a Fender, it's like much earlier in the gain stage. If you look at what disto, and especially on a Fender, by the time you like got it cranked, most of that's coming from the later power stage and stuff like that. So the thing to be would be to just keep that bass knob under control, so your preamp doesn't get swamped with fuzzy low end. And then, you set your mids and treble just to get the right amount of cut. Whereas on a Marshall, you can actually, especially if the power tubes are not like, cranked, you drop the mids and it has much more of an effect than it would, say, in a Fender. And also in a Marshall, typically they start chopping that bass from the preamp a lot earlier. So especially, the later stage ones, if you look back at the JDM 45, those were like closer to a Fender kind of amount of how much bass they let through. So
like a bassman, basically.
By the time you get to the tone stack, you can, get a lot more control if your power tubes are not cranked. If they are cranked, then the presence knob becomes your friend. That's how you kind of get it brighter or darker.
One thing that I always found interesting was, when people compare the Marshall to the Fender Bassman, the JTM 45 basically came from it, right? One thing that's never ever discussed, I don't think, is the ohm rating of the cabinet.
Yeah.
So on a Bassman, my Bassman's a 2 ohm cabinet, right? And when you go to a Marshall with a 4x12, it's a 16 ohm cab, or maybe if it's a 212, it's an 8 ohm, isn't it, right? 8 or 16, depending. But significantly higher, which I think gives it a very softer, I think it's one of the reasons those Bassmans and super reverbs as well have that real punchy kind of kick about it. It's very immediate feel to the notes. Do you know what I mean? Unlike anything else.
That's exactly what Derek Truck said when they asked him, like, why is the super reverb your favorite amp? He said, I think it's something to do with that 2 ohm thing, because it feels like the speakers are hardwired to your hands. That's what he said.
Yeah.
It's very immediate.
It's a very immediate sound, isn't it? I think I prefer super reverbs over Bassmans if I was to choose either, but mostly just because they have reverb in them.
Right.
Whereas my Bassman out there doesn't have reverb, and I really do miss having reverb. And then when you put reverb into a Bassman, like a reverb pedal, it's not the same as having it built in the amp, because especially if the amp's like at the point of distortion, then the reverb, you need to turn the reverb way down. It just doesn't like kind of work the same.
Do you know the Sir Bella? Most amps have got a 4, 8, 16 impedance switch. This one's got 2, 4, and 8. So you can actually run it at 2 ohms if you do have the right load. But unfortunately, I don't have a 2 ohm reactive load. So, can't do that.
Interesting. I wonder why they did that. Maybe so you can run it into a 4x10
apparently
cab.
because Sir's a huge fan of super reverbs. That's like one of his favorite amps. So I think if you do want to, run it into a 4x10 cab, you could totally wire it for 2 ohms if I think each speaker's 8 ohms.
Mesa Boogie had a 4x12, 4x10 cabinet for a while that had Jensens in it.
Yep.
I thought that was an interesting thing, because it was kind of built about the size of a Bassman and didn't look like a Bassman, but it had having Jensens and 410s in it. But I remember trying one. I think it was an 8 ohm load. But you could rewire it to be 2 ohm.
You could totally, if it's 8 ohms, you can wire it for 2.
Yeah.
In fact, that same cab has come up for sale twice on Facebook in the last.
A second-hand one.
Yeah. But
I was going to say they don't make it anymore, do they?
Asking for like $900 or $1,000, which I think is a little bit much for it. So I passed on it. If it does show up again at a more reasonable price, I may be tempted.
It'd be really good with your Bella. Like, that would be for a clean tone at 2 ohms. That'd be
Yeah.
be pretty
I
killer.
did have a 4x10 Mesa. I don't know if we spoke about it, but I had a Blue Angel, which was one of those 4x10 ones. And I did run the Bella into those 410 speakers, but the thing was wired at 8 ohms. I didn't really get it tried at 2. And I think that
Those Blue Angels were an interesting amp, weren't they? They were kind of, if I remember right, they had a blend of tubes or something unusual.
No, I'll tell you what, it was a weird thing. When they were testing it, they had that graphic EQ in line, and then finally they decided not to offer it as a feature. But then when they pulled it out, it changed the tone too much. So they basically took the graphic EQ section and put it in like a flat setting and put it in some goopy black thing, which...
So you couldn't chat.
So you couldn't open it up or whatever. But apparently that thing got super noisy over the years. And that was like the biggest... And that was my issue. It was just like Niagara Falls every time I switched that amp on. And I tried different tubes and, all that sort of thing. And then I found this kid who wanted an amp, and, I gave it to him at a decent price. So... that's
probably the best Mesa Boogie amp I've tried recently was the Lone Star. Did you ever try one of those?
Yeah, I have. They used to be staple at this one vendor in Delhi. So every time you'd go there, you'd get but that amp, it was never in good condition. So I can't really say I've tested a well working.
I played a few of them, and I remember always thinking, yeah, that's a killer amp. It's kind of Fender-ish, I suppose, but with a decent drive channel, but not a high gain. High gainish. I like those. I like the Maverick. Did you ever try a Maverick?
Yeah, those are nice.
Yeah. Those were good little combos. A couple of the Rocket little combos I like too. I've played a bunch of triple Rex, and I don't think I've ever found one that I thought was great. They're just okay.
Yep.
They're definitely more higher gain and bigger, fuller sounding than I'd ever want,
Yeah.
I'd like to try one of the new California Tweeds, which are basically like Fenders, but with switchable output. I think you can switch them down to 2 watt or something, and that'd be kind of interesting. They look like they're onto something with those.
Yeah.
So, but I haven't seen one in New Zealand. So
okay, now I've got a friend who's got one, so I have tried that one out.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I used to own a Mark III. I think in the late 2000s, for like maybe a couple of years, and then I swapped it for a JDM 45. Which then got used on that Wilco tour, and yeah, that was like a nice amp. But I think I quit my day job, so I sold that amp and paid 6 months rent.
Yeah, they were expensive, eh? And I've tried a few Mark IIIs. Is it the Mark IIc that's the famous one? I tried a couple of those.
Do you know who has my Mark III now? It's your friend Rob, the guitar tech.
Rob. Yes, he does.
He does.
Yeah.
That's my old
No, I knew that.
And it's a 110 voltage. It's not New Zealand voltage. So that's the
I've
only
seen it in
like
his,
a big ass
little workshop.
transformer.
That's Rob Matthews in Wellington. Yeah. The other one I tried. I had a Mark IV at one point. Man, that was a complicated amp.
Yeah.
And I had a Nomad. I still have a Nomad actually. I had a Nomad 45 with 410s for a while, which was a really good amp. But I never liked the EL84s in it.
Right.
To me, it didn't sound voxy with 410s, or just, with 410s they're kind of thinner sounding anyway, and then having EL84s, it just didn't have any, was way too mid-rangey for me. And then when I bought the Nomad 55 I have now, that's got 6 L6s and 2 12s. Right. That's great. It's heavy. I'm actually going to sell it because it's sat in the hallway for a year. And I'm like, I've got the Victoria Basement, I've got the Victoria Deluxe. In fact, what I'd like to get, the one amp I think would suit me the most would be have a little recording amp, like a Princeton, but with a 12, with reverb and tremolo.
Right.
And something that's about, 10 watts, 12 watts, like a 2.6v6. Reverb and tremolo built in.
There's a local guy called Mike C who does do, whatever Fender circuits you want. So you could get a Princeton, built and like a hand-wired one, and pop it in a 1x12. I think that'll be a really nice option to try. A little bit less.
Yeah,
than
that
a deluxe.
would probably be the most useful for me.
Yeah.
Especially for like a low-level jazz recording or acoustic thing like that, where you don't need volume, you just need a sweet tone. That would be really good. I did play my friend Lee Jackson's amp today. He's got a deluxe reverb, just the reissue one. But the difference is that last time I played it at his house, he has I don't know if you know Lee Jackson. Last time I played, he had the stock Jensen speaker in it, and I remember he's got I played his L5, which is I think it's a 62 or 57, like late 50s, early 60s L5. I remember playing it through it, and I was like, dude, this just isn't working. And he's like, I know. And then I played his 1956 175.
Right.
And it just sounded sweet. It was like awesome. I was like, that's the pairing, right? So he said, now I've put a new speaker in. He put a Celestian the cream back, Our Nico put that in. And I played it today, and he goes, try it with the L5. And I tried the L5, and I'm like, that's it. That's the sound right there, And then I said, what does it sound like with the 175 too? And he's like, it totally still works with that guitar as well.
That's cool.
But what a difference it made to that amp. Like it had this really weird kind of hard mid-range. Now it's just sweet in that mid-range, and it was really boomy with the L5. Now it's kind of, just sweetened it out. It was great.
Sure. I think a lot of people, including Bonamassa, they prefer Celestians in Fender combos. For whatever reason. I
want one of those creamback speakers now, but you know how much they cost?
Yeah, they're not.
Lee paid $880 for his.
So you're probably better off looking for one that pops up used.
Yeah, $880 for a single speaker. Wow. I'm like, cheapers.
Probably.
And I think that was secondhand too. We were just talking earlier too, before we kind of move on, was about that, how cool it is that Interstate Love Song has finally been corrected via that Tom Bukovac video.
Yeah.
There's that. Everybody knew this bit, but I always went. But it's. And then the coolest bit. That chord, which is basically a D flat 7. The 7 in the bass. Yeah, and then this chord,
minor 7 flat 5,
which is a B flat minor 7 flat 5, with an E natural, which is the flat 5 on the top.
I think on the minor 7 flat 5, you just simply lose that, and then you go to like an A major 7.
Is it major 7?
Play the minor 7 flat 5, the B flat minor 7. Yeah, take the index finger off. There you go. Oh, that's what he played.
I thought it was.
Could be, yeah.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
It both sound right. That's the thing. Like, it was so cool to see that guy, the guy that did it. This is how it goes.
Yeah,
and he actually remembered.
There's the video of Rob DeLeo on Rick Beato's thing, and he talks about how they wrote that song, which I found really interesting. So if you haven't seen that, go and watch that.
That it was originally a bossa nova.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought that was crazy. Exactly. Like, could you imagine it? And I can kind of see it, like how it would have started on it. I can picture it now, but I totally didn't get that. Yeah, I saw that one as too. It was really good.
Nice.
Isn't it awesome to have all this stuff now, though, and like all this resource that's out there, and some people don't even like pay any attention to it, but it's still awesome to have it.
Like the meaning of life could be in a YouTube video, and it'll have like 2 views.
Yeah. Have you seen that movie Seven? The Brad Pitt movie, Morgan Freeman movie. It's pretty. It's about the 7 deadly sins. It's pretty full on. Yeah. But there's a moment there, and he goes into a library to look up some books, and the security guards are in there playing poker or something, and he says to them, "You've got all this information around you, books about any topic you could ever want to do, and you sit around here playing poker." And that's sort of how I thought about, it sort of stuck in my head, kind of all this resource that people have on YouTube and everywhere, and hardly ever gets used, does it? Like, right, I guess, and it won't be long till you'll be able to see everything that everyone ever did with all this stuff,
Yeah.
Crazy thought.
But that's the cool thing, because now if you just want to learn a song, you just like how to play whatever song and get on. Some guys like at least attempted to get started on it, and you can at least use that.
And AI isolation parts, right? With Moses or whatever it's called. Yeah,
totally. Oh, by the way, before I forget, we have a very special guest next week when we reconvene. The lovely Chet O'Connell is going to be joining us. So yeah, looking forward to the next
episode. Is he going to be in-house or is he doing online with us?
No, he's
as well?
going to pop over here. I think we have a guitar hang that's long overdue for maybe like 3 or 4 years now. So, yeah, it'll be good to have him.
And also,
over.
I've spoken to Dixon Nacy. He's also keen to do it, but we just need to lock in a date sometime soon when
we're getting there.
Things get less chaotic. But Dixon would be great to have on.
Yeah, for sure.
Be good to have Lee Jackson on actually as well. I was talking to Lee today, so if Lee will do it, he gets a bit nervous on camera, so but it'd be awesome to chat with Chet, and he's a lovely chap.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Cool, man. We'll see you guys next week. And,
thanks, everyone.
With guest in tow. And till then, thanks for watching. See ya.